every second Thursday, and we cover the waterfront, shall we say? Or I should say we should cover a good part of Marin County, half of Marin County at least is in public lands. And today we're really going to focus, we have an unusual agenda. We're going to focus on how we use, on the users of our public lands, because we represent many, many different constituents. There's been a huge increase in numbers of people who are enjoying our public lands. And we felt it was time to have a conversation and sort of shine the light on the visitor experience, because it's not one experience, it's many. And many of you represent various ways to enjoy the art open space. So we're going to hear during the first half of the meeting, till about 4 o'clock, from many of you who represent different ways of enjoying our open space lands. And then from about 4 o'clock, we are going to hear from our land managers who have the responsibility, along with us, of really maintaining these lands for future generations. So we're looking forward to hearing from them. From many of you are on board right now, and we look forward to meeting with all of you. Greg, do you want to explain, my co-host, Greg Zitney, explain briefly our protocol? Most of you are familiar probably with the Zoom protocol, but he's going to run through it. Okay.
Yeah, just a couple of notes. I want to point out, by the way, that Zoom has been providing updates rather frequently for the last few weeks. So if you haven't updated your Zoom program for a while, you might want to make a point to do that. For those of you who may not realize it, the raise hand function now is in the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. At least for the desktop version, it's at the bottom. So you'll find out in the reactions button. And I think we're going to ask for questions to use that raise hand function as a priority. If you have a hard time finding it, we'll try to see people who are madly waving their hands. But we'd like you to try to use that digital raise hand function as a priority. Or you can also write questions in the chat box, and we will try to monitor that as well. We're also going to ask that each person mute yourselves when you are not speaking, and try to remember to unmute, obviously, when you are, and then mute yourselves again when you're finished. And if we have any troubles along those lines, I have the power to magically mute you if you forget, and also to take your hand down if you forget once you've asked a question. So with that, I'll turn it back to Nona.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much. We're going to start. The purpose of the first half of the meeting is to hear from, we're going to start with a nature hiker with a photo essay from Larry Scheibel. Well, we'll get to that in just a moment. But I wanted to start, first of all, I think, Janet, you've got a brief time. We wanted to hear an announcement from you on the status of Parks Conservancy, how things are going. So let's turn it over to Janet.
Hi, everybody. So I'm kind of here to share sort of the continuing saga of the Parks Conservancy struggle, economic struggle right now. And this is a week where we are announcing another 50 layoffs. So kind of big picture, the Conservancy pre-COVID had about 400 employees and annual revenue of around $64 million, the vast majority of which was directly tied to tourism and Alcatraz. So that revenue stream has effectively shut off and gone to zero. And it has gone on longer than was anticipated. So we retained as many staff as we could for as long as we could. And in December, a very large number of employees who had been in a furloughed state were laid off. And we went down to about 259 positions. Today, once the layoff notifications are complete, some of them will become effective in April, some in July, and some in October. depending on sort of the funding source that those positions were tied to or contract obligations. But by the end of October, we will be down to about 190 staff. So the earlier wave of layoffs were related to kind of the Alcatraz and retail sales and cafe operations, or people who work directly with school groups and where COVID has created circumstances where they couldn't perform their job duties before. Now the layoffs are cutting into other parts of the organization. So of the 50 that were announced this week, 36 of them are within Sharon Farrell's larger projects, stewardship, and science department. So it is starting to like move into the universe of folks that you know, sort of, I think that you, the Marin Conservation League, think of as being part of the Parks Conservancy. So I'm not at liberty this week to like announce names because that like the process isn't done. And then we as an organization are figuring out what that's going to mean for our operations. And that process will probably take another few months. But I think when I come back in March, I'll be able to be a lot more specific with you about kind of like how it's going to trickle into you know, like the programs and the ways in which you interface with the Parks Conservancy and with our partners. The One TAM enterprise remains. Most of the staff associated with the One TAM enterprise are still are going to carry forward. I'm trying to think what else I can say without over speaking. But I just, you know, we're becoming smaller, but we're still not small. And I think we have a lot to figure out in the short term, but our assumption is we're going to come back, you know, with renewed focus and energy once we get through this really hard hump. So, and I guess in conclusion, I will say, I beg your patience if we are slower than normal, probably for a good month. And like, if we're a little less responsive and getting back to folks who send emails and inquiries our way, it's an intense time at the Conservancy. And, you know, our attention is with the really talented staff that we sadly have to say goodbye to.
That's hard, really hard. I'm sorry, what I did not do was to introduce Janet. There are quite a few of you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I
Yeah,
just, like, I'm here so often, I forget.
Yes, right. You know, there's some new people here today. So if you could introduce yourself, Janet, so that people are aware, and how long the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy has been active also.
So my name is Janet Klein, and I am the Director of Conservation and Community Science with the Golden Gate Parks Conservancy. And the Conservancy, I actually don't know when it started. I believe it came into being in the early 80s, and it started as a little tiny bookshop, and it grew to an enormous enterprise, largely due to the popularity of the programs that it offered in association with Alcatraz. And so the Conservancy is a Friends of Support organization primarily for the National Park Service, but it's also in partnership with the Presidio Trust and the Bridge District, and then the partners within the One TAM initiative. So the Marin Water, get used to the new name, California State Parks, and Marin County Parks. And it really exists for the purpose of generating revenue and then turning that around to advance the conservation of our parks and people's connections to our parks. And that mission will get, is kind of like going through a slight redesign, which I hope to be able, either myself or Claire or Sharon will share with you in March.
Yeah. Thanks very much. And it's hard news. We'll hear more from you. We'll be in touch. Thanks very much, Janet.
Thank you.
Okay. So beginning our series of how we experience our public lands, and that means our open spaces, our national parks, state parks, the watershed. We're going to have Larry Scheibel is going to give us a kind of a photo essay. He's a photographer and has been hiking Mount Burdell for the past 16, 17 years. And so Larry, why don't you come forward? I don't see you right now, but I know that you're there. And you're familiar with how to share the screen? Larry, you can unmute yourself. Larry Scheibel, I know you're there. Can you unmute yourself, Larry? Let me see if I can find you. Participants, okay, hold on. Greg, can you find Larry in there? I think he's on the participant list. And help him share his screen. Have we lost Larry?
It looks like it, Nona. I don't see him on the list.
You don't see him on the list. He was on the list. Okay. Okay, we'll try to, Martha, are you still on the call? Okay, well, this is not unusual.
Yes,
Or Zoom-
I am. He's not, he dropped off.
He dropped off. Okay, could you try to locate him if that's possible?
Yep.
We have and so let's move on. This is not the first time that we.
Stage fright, maybe,
just-
huh?
What's that?
Stage fright.
Well, I think not unfamiliar with the technology. He's a great photographer. So let's move on to a group of users, the equestrians, who have been riding public lands for many, many years. And we're going to ask Robert Eichstaedt to kind of lead that. Are you going to share a screen, Robert, or are you going to just talk?
Yeah, I'd like to, I threw some pictures together, and by sharing a screen, you don't have to have me in big
Love to see you.
form. I can be a little guy in a little box.
Yeah, okay.
So try to keep this brief per your request. And so this is where I start on this stuff. We live in a paradise, and everybody's always discussing, sometimes heatedly, what they think things should look like or how they should work. Frankly, none of us should complain about anything. We have way more than we need, and we have way more than we should want, and we get it all. So I'm grateful to whatever gave me whatever I have. This in particular, my Horse Hill, the beautiful place we live. So just to sidebar a little thing, we have user groups, which is a bureaucratic term that I really don't like because we tend to drop into it. First of all, it makes us sound like consumers. We're users, and we're in a group. But frankly, all of us do different things on open space, and that's probably the point that will come up as we hear other people talk today. We're essentially visitors, and visitors in the sense of guests on public lands. And our activities there are managed activities. So if you do it correctly, the agencies should be managing activities, not users. Enough of that. So I've been around. My credentials are old guy. Here I am in 91, setting trail for the Ride for the Ridge, Barbara White's great fundraising event. Had a nice ride that day, 35 miles, hanging up ribbons. And since well before then and well after that, I've been doing things on the trail, on a horse, on several bikes, on foot in particular. And I continue to find really beautiful places to be in the county. Horses have been around forever, centuries, beyond centuries, eons. Until recently, they mostly died and worked for us. And we're gradually finding ways to relate to horses better. they're still kind of working for us, but in a way that suits what they're best at, which is teaching us stuff or showing us stuff. So I'm glad to be living now when we're actually wising up to what horses do and what we should do in partnership with them. And this is a point that many people made. I surveyed a bunch of equestrians, got about a half a dozen responses about their trail riding in Marin, about what they do and don't like, enjoy, their histories. And I put a link to that, those survey responses in the chat. It's a compiled document that will let you see what those 6 trail riders have said about their experiences. And I encourage you to go get that. I think you can download it and read it because it tells a lot about recent history in Marin and the trails. Not too recent, late 60s, early 70s, trail riding in Marin was pretty informal. This is the old barn up on Diaz Ridge when there was still something of a ranch there. Down below this was the Flying Y, which is another stable. Karen Johnson told me that the Diaz Ridge tribe and the Flying Y tribe would get together, meet up, and just ride hell-bent all over the landscape. And it looked like fun. I don't see a helmet. I don't see a saddle. I don't see any special techniques hanging on. So this is about when I came into it. And at about the same time, population increased, other types of activities increased, other user groups increased, and things kind of changed. But going back to the horse, if you read the survey results, you'll find that all of the respondents regard their horse as their partner, and I mean partner with a capital P. For some of those folks, and for me, my horse is a teacher and also a counsel. And as he got older, he became sort of just a monk, a guru. And my job was simply to give him everything he needed to be alive. So the relationship of the horse and the people who are riding horses on trails is not one of someone who is using a toy or a tool in pursuit of recreation. It's not that at all. And so when somebody says that they feel unsafe on the trail, they're actually speaking in regards to their horse, to the quiet and the peace of their relationship together. So it's important to know, that the rider is one with their horse in every sense of the word, including things that they fear, things that they are attracted to, and things they enjoy. So just in summary, trail riders in Marin are a historic cultural resource, a rich one. There's a lot there. I could entertain you for hours with history of trail riding in Marin. Maybe we'll do that someday. Additionally, trail riders are, as are other horse owners in the county, are the horse keepers for the community. You don't have the time, you don't have the money that you're willing to commit. You don't have the space to keep a horse, but we do. And we keep it so that you can enjoy the animals as well as we do. We do that by simply being out there, making the horse available for everyone to see. And you can always get any trail rider that I know to go anywhere with their horse if you ask them to. My horse went to every single trail opening, wedding, memorial, and party that we could get to, and we enjoyed it. Trail riders connect with others on the trail, most particularly those who are on foot or hoof. We have very similar sense of what we enjoy and what we wish for. Essentially slow, serene, with a perception of personal safety. These are very common desires. And so the foot people in general really have a lot in common. And foot people who are elderly have just as much in common. Need for some serenity, some quiet, some sense of safety. Very important stuff to folks as they get old, like I do. So what are the trail riders asking for from the agencies? Well, they'd like to be consulted about trails. There's nothing special about a horse trail. If it's safe for an old guy with a cane and bad hearing, it's probably safe for a horse. But we'd like to be involved. We'd like to see all trail bridges have low curbs. We'd like to see sight lines that are maintained and trail widths that are brushed back. Ask a trail rider about a trail. They'll give you some hints. Everyone in the survey and everybody I've talked to wants regulations enforced. And they don't want education unless the education happens to be enforcement. Again, download that little compendium, and every single person had complaints, and these are not whiny complaints. These are simply real life stories about issues with other users on the trail, visitors, doing things that made them feel unsafe. And then in general, trail riders would like everyone to recognize what a great resource the horse in the community is. We know it, and you probably know it, but we'd like you to actually honor that. It's in everyone's favor. It's one of my favorite pictures. We'll leave it at this. These are the kids at Ed McGuire School. They've come up to do a little art on top of Horse Hill. And I like the young person sprawled out there and the horse scratching his back. Anyway, thank you very much.
Great, thanks. Thanks very much, Robert. That was lovely. Now we're going to turn to Tom. I'll let you introduce your crew. We've got Tom Boss, who's the off-road manager from Marin County Bicycle Coalition, and with him are Haley Randall, who is on the bike team at Redwood High, and Erica Lovejoy. I think I saw you here someplace, right? And then kind of always independent. Al Bowman has never been anything but really independent. And he's going to talk a little bit from his perspective. He's been an advocate for mountain bikes for decades in Marin County. So Tom, why don't you take it and introduce your crew?
Okay, sure. Thanks everybody. And I just wanted to quickly say a couple words myself, and I'll keep it brief. Everybody can hear me, I assume. Let's see here. I was going to share my screen while we're doing this. These are actually just a few pictures I just screenshotted off of photos that are shared by my friends who bike, and I thought it'd be nice just to show a few of these because they're pretty cool pics. Marin County is the birthplace of mountain biking, and I think that's something to celebrate. It's not by chance. It's the fact that we have a very entrepreneurial spirit here in Marin County, combined with the abundance of public land. MCBC hosts a wildflower ride that we partner with the California Native Plant Society on. And we discovered in putting that together that It was actually a bloom of wildflowers in the mid 70s that happened after the early 70s droughts that actually drew a lot of the pioneer mountain bikers, got kind of accelerated them getting those clunkers out because they wanted to see all these amazing wildflowers that were happening right at, following the rains after a long drought. I personally choose mountain biking for a variety of reasons. Sometimes I'm just trying to get an hour or so of cardio. It offers freedom, exploration, and solitude, and of course, really great social time. My first spotting of a bald eagle, bobcat, San Francisco garter snake, calypso orchid, and many other things happened while I was on a bike ride out in our parks. So, and I just wanted to touch on we think that new trails provide the ability to spread the users out a little more evenly. And that's, I think, a good thing. And so that's why we do advocate for some new trail opportunities, but most of those projects are actually taking an old road and converting it into a better experience for everybody. We're not, in anything we do, we really advocate for stuff that also benefits the environment, that it has a component that will reduce the overall impacts on the environment. So with that, I'll pass the mic over to Haley to tell a little bit about her off-road experiences.
Hi, I'm Haley Randall. I'm a senior at Redwood High School, and I race professionally for Bear National Team and Team USA. Cross country mountain biking, so no crazy downhill stuff. And so I've been consistently riding in Marin open space for like the past 7-ish years consistently. And I really enjoy being able to get out for exercise and for training, as well as to be able to connect with the amazing place that I'm so fortunate to grow up in, the nature and the views, and it's just couldn't be nicer. Plus amazing weather to ride year round. So since the start of the pandemic, I've noticed a massive increase in trail users of all kinds, primarily hikers and people driving in, like trailheads like Tennessee Valley and Blythedale Ridge are becoming crowded with cars, and on the weekends especially. And so to avoid this influx of trail users, I've started to not ride on the weekends or ride indoors on a trainer for my exercise and workout on the weekends, just because I feel like there are just too many people on the trails and just more than the trails can handle. And it makes the experience so much less enjoyable for everyone when more people are out there. And I feel like since I'm so fortunate to live here, if I can just go on the weekdays or in the middle of the day instead when no one else is out, that would be just more beneficial for everyone. Of course, this is a little bit frustrating to, be a local and pay the taxes and everything, and then feel like you can't go out and use the open space in your backyard whenever you feel like it. But what can you do? It's nice that people from the city and the East Bay are able to drive to Marin and benefit from the open spaces as well. I did notice though, when Tennessee Valley Road was closed and a lot of the parking areas on TAM were closed because the government didn't want people traveling around because of COVID, there was a significant decrease in people on the trails, and it was just overall way better. And so I think maybe introducing a fee system for parking or limiting parking that's available will help to promote local use in Marin open space, which I think is really important. And then also, like Robert mentioned, enforcement of rules. The amount of people that are like just parked in the street or in bike lanes is really frustrating, as well as people who have their dogs off leash in leash areas and, e-bikes that are on trails where they shouldn't be. And it's just overall, I think enforcement would really benefit everyone, and just to help keep everyone safe, especially, it's really, if you're going down a trail and there's a dog running around, it's kind of scary for everyone. I mean, I've been bitten before, and I don't think anyone on a horse wants that either. And hikers don't want that either. It's just, you know, if those rules were enforced, it would be so much nicer for every trail user's experience. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much. Haley, Erica, we haven't met, but I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. I really, really appreciate having the opportunity to share my experiences with the group. And I'm really here because I am truly hoping that folks in our community can really start working together better to resolve some of the conflicts around recreational use, and also to help hopefully work with the group more to get everybody to collaborate on restoring our natural areas too. But I want to caveat, so again, I'm Erica Lovejoy. Many people do know me in my professional role, so I want to let you know I'm here in my personal role. And professionally, I work on habitat restoration and endangered species issues with all levels of agencies. And if you haven't already interfaced with me on that level, you may soon. So in terms of my biking experience, so I've been a mountain biker for more than 25 years. I lived in Mill Valley for more than 12 years. Back in the day, I used to race mountain bikes, and now I hike just as much as I bike, admittedly, for health reasons and to mix things up. But I'm also one of those aging cyclists who has shifted to use of an e-bike also. So Haley, I used to race too, but you know, this aging things happen. And so that being able to use the e-bike has really been enabled me to continue meaningful access because I've gone through ups and downs where, you know, frankly, there's been times where I haven't been able to walk. So it's a pretty big deal for me. In terms of my preferences and user experience, for me, just like the hikers and the folks, horse people and dog walkers and everybody else, I ride mountain bikes to get out in nature, and being able to go out on a bike it helps me to get further into nature and you know, have more solitude, see wildlife, have quiet, and get away from crowds because that is a major issue here. In terms of trail type preferences, like many mountain bikers, I really love riding on single track. For me, it allows for a slower, more enjoyable ride that's more fun and engaging. And I think that when you get a bunch of folks on fire roads, especially a bunch of different groups, along with bikers, bikes can get going a lot faster, and I've seen a lot more accidents there. A big part of the recreational experience for me depends upon the local attitude about cyclists and then the approach to recreation management, because it has a huge impact on how everybody behaves. And I think we all know that. And the most enjoyable experiences I've had have been in areas where there's been a real effort by land managers to create more equitable access for different user groups. And then it's places where everybody's pitching in. You know, I lived in Tahoe for a long time, and I've ridden my bike all over the world with the racing experiences. And you know, where there's this like, okay, we're all in this together, folks. You're all equally responsible for your behavior, and for helping to maintain trails and do things. There just ends up being a lot more respect and positive interactions. And then I do believe in much more of an education focus versus enforcement. There's, you know, with a more collaborative approach, there's, you know, people work together, and there's more peer pressure for accountability. So in terms of the trail design and management, I have to say, you know, I've had my best experiences where there has been more access, where folks can spread out. You know, of course, concentrating folks in any one area or just to certain trails can have more of an impact and possibly present more conflicts and hotter tempers. So we know that. So I really wish that in Marin County across the board, more trails would just be opened up and spread the love throughout the watersheds. Other things that have really worked great in my experience is where people use bells. I've used them before. It really helps a lot. People know you're coming. Places like San Luis Obispo use a bell system. There's little boxes. You take a bell, you leave a bell. That's been great. on directional trails, like not too far from me, I got Green Gulch Trail. That's been really great. Creates a lot more consistency. People know what to expect. Everybody's going the same direction. And then with alternate user days, that's also been a great experience for me. I used to live in Tahoe, and Flume Trail is one of the busiest trails around. Excellent approach. I really wish we would do that here. And I hope there's ways that that can be done. Back to my experience here, specifically in Marin, and I know this issue of enforcement is a huge deal. People who behave really badly in any user group certainly need to be called on that. But with the focus on enforcement, I have to admit, there's times when I've been out on the trails where I have been treated very aggressively by both rangers and by just other trail users who just simply seem like they just don't want me there, even though I slow and wave and stop, and I really go out of my way. And I've had, it's to the point where sometimes when I see a ranger, I am often afraid of them. I don't know whether I'm going to be harassed. I don't know what's going to happen. Of course, there's been some rangers who've been amazing. It's really a mixed bag.
Erica, yeah,
Yeah.
we are going to talk that in more detail in March. We're going to really focus on education and enforcement. So we're going to touch that topic, but not today.
Thank you. I just want to share my experience and add, and say that when there's been education and the relationship building, I think it really goes a long way to, the signage and people talking to each other. And that's where I've had my best experiences. Let's see. And it's the same with other user groups, but, it really depends on where people are coming from. And ultimately, I just hope that, the leaders in Marin County, whether it's the conservation groups who are, playing a very important role, or the agencies that folks really come together and help reset the tone of the relationships. And that there's more equity across the board. And that we all start really working on it together. And that's why I very much appreciate this meeting, and Nona and the others for you putting this together to try and come up with a more thoughtful approach where we're all trying to listen to each other, because we all deserve access. And I think we can all do this together and help make a better system.
Thanks very much, Erica. Great. Al, can we hear from you?
Thank you, Nona. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Thanks for letting me speak, and I do appreciate the designation as the aging user of an e-bike.
Sorry for the stereotype, but I'm in there with you.
Yeah, I fit the picture perfectly. I do have only one graphic, and that's right there. I don't know if you can see it. That's an e-bike.
We can see it.
It has a motor, and it has a battery, and it has my own personal first aid kit and defibrillator. Going to be a lot more of these on our trails as families get into biking, which they certainly have during COVID. The parents want to ride with the kids, and everyone's graduating eventually from the bike park to the trails, where there'll be even more people of the aging type like me, the infirm type with disabilities, and others who may inherit their grandfather's used e-bike. So we are going to see a lot more of it. And I think there are measures we can take that'll help us all get along. The difference between the e-bike and a regular bike is narrowing, because the batteries and the motors are getting a lot lighter. And right now, the weight and the impression on the trail of an e-bike is about the same as that of what we call a downhill bike, which we see a lot of out there that have heavier suspensions, and they're a little bit tougher, but the weights are getting very close, and so is the impact. I'm not totally without credentials. I was a Parks and Open Space Commissioner for about 7 years. And I still serve as an advisor to mountain bike groups and to the new mountain bike group, which is called E-Bike Access. There are lots of reasons why people demand, excuse me, I shouldn't say that, but some people do demand, but people buy e-bikes. And this includes, as I said, the family stuff, the age and infirmity, the commercial pressures from the corporations, from the sales, and from rentals, and from the way magazines try to represent the e-bike, which is a bit too dynamic compared to what how we ride every day. E-bikers want mostly the same things that regular bikers want. We want to be outdoors and experience the healthy body and mind that we get from participating in outdoor activities. We want to have the ability to affect our effort in terms of as we age and try to stay in shape. The e-bike has 3 levels of assist. It's only 1 horsepower at its maximum, and you can ride that bike with no assistance at all, or you can ride it with up to 3 modalities where you may have to pedal a little less, but you can never stop. And if you can't get up the hills, you can't get up the hills even with an e-bike if you don't make the effort. We do like, just like everybody else that rides, we like the rhythm and flow of narrow trails. We like the challenges of some technical stuff which is usually found on narrow trails. And we like to participate with other users in maintaining the resource, working on the maintenance. And if you look at who's out there when it comes time to fix something or to do something, the bikers are there. And even the old e-bikers, if they can actually get to the site of the work. Another thing that I would want to mention, which I've already heard a little bit about, is I think dilution and separation are important aspects of getting along on the trail. The less crowded we are, the more room for everybody to enjoy themselves, and the less fear we have of having problems on the trail. And that's why I think that we should consider not just shared use trails, but shared by users, user only, even the alternate days, and the one ways that we got into the policy changes when I was on the commission, and also into the countywide plan. These are things that should be considered. We would like to see the work of MMD continued because they're doing a great job of trying to assess the use of e-bikes on their service roads and fire roads. And I'm hoping that they'll come up with a trial period in the end so that we can get some real data on what the impact is of e-bikes on the trail and how many are really out there.
Al, I'm going to have to move along. I'm sorry.
Okay, I think 90% of users are courteous on the trail, and most of the conflict is at the meetings, to tell you the truth. I'd like to see the Mount Tam, the One Tam effort of combining things and working together, and I believe that jurisdictions could work together on signage, trail standards, common codes, and observers to document what goes on the trails, as well as common enforcement. In summary, I would say that I hope we'll follow the national, state, and local trail managers in their putting e-bikes on the trails and evaluating what that looks like over time, with always the right to change the privilege of access by the local managers. And I would say that the other thing, and the last thing, is that we'd like to see e-bikes regarded in terms of access the same as regular mountain bikes. Thank you for the chance.
Okay, Al. Thanks very much. Thanks very much. I think Larry, you're back with us, Larry?
Yes, I am.
You are. Okay. And are you able to share your screen? Larry's going to sort of give us, in my view, one of the reasons we love open space, and that is his photo chronicle of years of enjoying the open space lands of Mount Burdell. So Larry, are you able to share your screen?
I think I have it here.
Great, okay. Okay, you can show, let's see, slideshow from the beginning. far left. Up, the menu bar on the far left. Yeah, great. Okay. Okay.
I appreciate this opportunity to share with you some of my photographs and experiences on Mount Burdell. I'm a retired geotechnical engineer. I've been hiking on Mount Burdell for 16 years. This is the open space district map of Burdell. The yellow highlights the route that I've been hiking for several years up there. Currently, I only hike on the Dwarf Oak Trail down here in this area. The Dwarf Oak Trail is a hiker and horse trail only. Mountain bikes are not allowed and dogs must be on leash. Sorry, you didn't have my pointer up here. This large area of Burdell to the east of the Dwarf Oak Trail, I'm going to refer to in my talk as the main area of Burdell. I'd like to start with a few landscape photographs. This photograph in the lower left side here is the Dwarf Oak Trail. And the photo here on the right also shows the Dwarf Oak Trail. In years when we have rain, we have a lot of wildflowers growing on Mount Burdell. Also, when we have rain, we have a lot of mushrooms on Burdell. In addition to the wildlife, there are also cows on Burdell for about 5 months every year. I have not noticed any significant impact of the cows on wildlife, at least not with regard to the larger mammals. I have a lot of photos I want to show you today, so I'm going to go through these quickly. About 12 years ago, I began trying to document the animals I saw in Burdell with photographs. I'm only going to talk about the animals I no longer see or see less frequently today. I often see lizards on Mount Burdell, but less frequently than in previous years. This is especially true on the main area of Burdell. The number of newts I see on the trails has certainly declined over the years. I'm not sure if the actual populations have declined or if it's just more difficult to see them because of the large numbers of people on the trails. Same is true for snakes. I see fewer of them now than in the past. Again, this may be due to the snakes being forced off the trails by increasing numbers of visitors. I'm not a birder, but I wanted to show you a small sample of the types of birds that I see on Burdell. Again, I will go through these quickly and just discuss a few. All of these are birds commonly seen in the Bay Area. Acorn woodpeckers up here are very common along the Dwarf Oak Trail. I see a variety of hawks along with harriers, merlins, and other raptors on Burdell. This bird in the lower left-hand corner here is a golden eagle. Kites and kestrels are also very common on Burdell. A pair of turkey vultures were born in this tree or hatched in this tree for years before the tree collapsed a couple of years ago. I believe that this screech owl on the right here flew into this fence during the night, and I was having a hard time figuring out how to get off the fence and get airborne again. At least one great horned owl has been born along the trail every year for the last several years. In the past, it was possible to see large groups of turkeys roaming around in the main area of Burdell, but not so today. Next, the mammals. Years ago, it was possible to see large numbers of gophers on the trails, but surprisingly, I see very few of them today. Squirrels are very common, and I still see many of them along the Dwarf Oak Trail. Rabbits are still common along the Dwarf Oak Trail, but not on the main area of Burdell. Skunks don't seem to pay much attention to people, but are certainly impacted by dogs. The number of coyotes I see has declined significantly over the years. It was once possible to see small groups of coyotes hunting together on Mount Burdell, but not today. Same is true of foxes. Years ago, I saw 3 in one day, but rarely see any today. I have seen 3 badgers on Burdell, but none since 2012. I probably have hundreds of bobcat photos in my files, but have not seen any in the last couple of years. This day I saw this baby bobcat years ago up here. I also saw 2 adults on the same day. The deer are my favorite wildlife animals in Burdell. Prior to COVID-19, I would see several of them every time I walked the Dwarf Oak Trail. That is not the case today. Currently, I see very few deer or any other wildlife animals along the Dwarf Oak Trail. And next, I'd like to show some photographs of recreational activities I believe are impacting the wildlife. These 2 photos show a group of people headed up a social trail with off-leash dogs, tables, chairs, and wagons headed someplace. These are high school sports teams that use the Dwarf Oak Trail for training purposes. These are more groups of people gathered on the preserve, including a movie or video shoot up here in the upper left-hand corner. These are groups of mountain bikers and skateboarders on the Dwarf Oak Trail. There were a total of 9 bikers in this group. This photo shows an off-leash dog here chasing 2 does up a social trail. These were the only 2 deer I had seen in the main area of Burdell in over a year, and I believe this is the reason why. These are photos of off-leash dogs running loose on social and single-track trails. I often see dogs like this one and dog walkers separated by huge distances. Since the COVID-19 outbreak, I am seeing probably 1.5 to 2 times as many people in the main area of Burdell as before. On the Dwarf Oak Trail, that number is probably 2 to 3 times as many. However, the number of violations I see has gone up much greater than that. I suspect that deer and other wildlife animals may have switched to looking for food at night or early in the morning to avoid crowds of people. These photos show mountain bikers on the Dwarf Oak Trail and dog walkers using lights at night. I believe these nighttime activities are also having a negative impact on the wildlife. I hope it will be possible to see deer and other wildlife animals on Burdell in the future. However, I'm not sure that will be the case, and I'm very concerned about what is happening to them. Thank you.
No, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, okay, I muted myself. The rain's making a lot of noise here. Larry, that was lovely. That was a great exposition of why we care about our public lands, and also a concern that the increasing use by all of us has on the wild, on the native plants and wildlife. Thanks very much. We're going to turn to Arlin Weinberger, who's going to talk about walkers, hikers who have been flocking to Marin County, to Mount Tam for many decades. Arlin, are you there? There you are.
I am unmuted. I can't pretend to represent all hikers, but I have been hiking in Marin for probably 25 years now, maybe. Frequently, I go with a small group, and those people would include, say, initially Sierra Club. That's how I first got over here hiking when I lived in the city. Friends of Mount Tam, California Alpine Club, One Tam now. Can't think of anybody else. Friends of Mount Tam, if I didn't say that. And these are people who hike for all the reasons that have been mentioned, you know, to get out in nature, to get some exercise. But the advantage of the small groups, and I should define small, in my mind, the groups that we would prefer are 10 to 12. And right now, because of the pandemic, they're smaller, if at all. I know that on land that has limits of sizes of hikes, we will divide the hike into 2 groups on Water District land and leave sufficiently apart so we're not one big group in about 5 minutes. There's a sociability factor. For those of us who maybe live alone, live remotely, don't interact with people that we'd like to as much as we would like to, we get together, we meet at the trailhead. All of these groups have websites that tell you where to go and when and what the expectations are. The hikes that I've been doing, roughly 8 miles, mostly but not exclusively on Mount Tam. We stop for lunch someplace, and have time to socialize with each other. The group is it's quite varied. I mean, there are people who kind of hang back like I do, so I can take pictures of things, whether it's down on my knees looking at a flower or a landscape. There's always 2 or 3 people on a hike that prefer that. Of course, the exercise, but just getting out in nature and not just walking around the block, which really is not the same. Even though it might be the same amount of exercise, it's very different. Well, it's hard to say. Right now, of course, things are so difficult with hiking groups that as I said, most of these organizations do not have official hikes anymore. And if they do, they're very limited, like they're limited to 10 people and you have to sign up. But the people I know miss these group hikes immensely right now. And I'm sure we'll get back to it as soon as we can, and keeping the numbers limited. Let's see, if you belong to the California Alpine Club, for example, there's other things to do in the club other than just hike, but that is a major activity. Hiking on Mount Tam is the prerogative really now of the state park, and that gets closed, shut down, and then open and then shut down again. The problems, I don't want to get into the weeds too much with this, but it's hard to find hike leaders for people to commit to that kind of responsibility. But that's sort of another issue. When we're out there, first of all, as I think it was maybe Haley said, that pretty much the people I know prefer to hike weekdays because it's generally less crowded. Having said that, I was at Tennessee Valley yesterday. I got there at 9 o'clock and I had never seen it that crowded. I was very lucky to get a parking place, but you're right. And when we came back about 2 o'clock, it was just as bad. Maybe, no, it was worse. And I don't begrudge anyone getting out there and walking on the Tennessee Valley Road with their kids and their strollers and bikes and whatever. But it is true, once we got off the main road and up into the coastal trail, there were far fewer people for very good reasons. That's a steep trail. But Haley, you're right, and other people have said the increase has been noticeable. The problem with this, when we hike, of course, we prefer single track trails as well. And we, of course, would definitely not like to see more bikes on those single track trails, because if there's 8 to 10 people hiking and you've got a cyclist coming at us, it's dangerous. They need to slow down. We need to find a place to step aside. Depending on the trail, it's a real hazard. And I can't remember whether it was, maybe it was Haley or one of the cyclists came up with any number of suggestions that could work. I'm not going to get into those because they've been discussed and gotten no place before. We do sometimes hike on wide fire roads, and the temptation, of course, is you've got a wide road and you want people 4 abreast talking to each other. Well, no, we try to keep people 2 abreast, even on a fire trail, and stay out of the way of the mountain bikers. Don't see too many horses. There were horses in Tennessee Valley. I see them once in a great while at China Camp. But horse hiker encounters, in my mind, have been few and far between. It's other users that the problem is. On the fire roads, as I was saying, because we know they're multi-use and we expect other users, we try to stay to the right, and we're more aware of the fact that there are other users there. I love the idea of the bicycle bells. That helps so much. I live near China Camp, and of course, all the trails there are legal for bicycles, and that's fine. And most people are quite respectful and slow down. I see a lot of families now are dads with 3 kids behind them. They need to train the kids a little bit better. I nearly got mowed down by some 10-year-old who didn't bother to tell me he was behind me, and I didn't hear or see him. And when I turned around, he didn't know what to do. He didn't know where to go, left or right or whatever. I strongly suggested he yell out before he crept up on me. So I guess I'd have to say that, like everybody using the trail, that safety is our first concern. If we trip over our own feet and fall down, well, that's something. If we're leaping out of the way of a bicycle and fall, that's a whole nother issue. And I personally I've had some close encounters. I haven't had any horrible accidents yet. And I will agree that most, but certainly not all, cyclists are pretty well behaved, but it only takes a few to really tarnish the image. And there are, I have to say, younger people, mostly guys, boys, who are hell-bent on going as fast as they can, with very little regard to the fact that they might run into another person on the trail, let alone a horse or a dog. As a hiker, I really appreciate also quietness. And occasionally we have people on their bicycles who have their phones on to some very loud music, which is really annoying and distracting. I guess I should be glad they're going fast because they get by me faster, but it's I don't know what you can do about that. The whole issue of simple courtesy for other users on the trail, for everybody. I mean, as hikers, we need to step aside without being, too grumpy about it. And of course, the other big issue is enforcement, and that just doesn't happen any place I've been. And it's very difficult to know what to do about that. You know, rangers are overworked. Parks aren't staffed enough.
We'll take that up in more detail.
Yes, we're going to
in
discuss
March.
that.
Yeah,
in
we're
more
going to
detail
really
later.
focus on that.
So just having rules and regulations, I mean, that's fine, but I think most users have a pretty good idea of what the rules are. Whether they play by them or not is another matter. And if they know they can get away with it, they do. I mean, not hikers, of course, but the rest. So I don't know. I don't have any pictures. I didn't even think about pictures of people hiking, which isn't very interesting. You know, we like all the things everybody likes, being outdoors, flowers, birds, scenery, trees, everything. We just, I guess like everybody, we want to be left in peace and not fear for our safety while we're hiking along, you know, in a group of 10 people, single file. Can be an issue.
Thanks.
So I will give up whatever time I have left to the next person.
Well, we're just about out of time for our presentations. But I did, the one person I had asked to come because he has some very strong views, and that's a distance runner, George Foreman, who has not joined us today, who has been running the Mount Tam trails for many, many years, mostly Mount Tam, and is very vocal. I think some of you in the biking community have probably run into George. He doesn't show up politically a lot, but his main complaint is that the narrow trails that are, particularly on watershed lands, that are illegal for bikes are chronically poached and used by bikes, and the condition of those trails has deteriorated considerably over the decades of use. That his complaint, he will continue to make that complaint about other areas wherever there are single trails that are not maintained, that have been worn down by the constant friction of bike wheels, primarily by that. So anyway, I think I'm kind of trying to channel George in a brief way. Before we turn to our land managers, let's just take a couple of minutes for any questions, any comments that you may have to elaborate on what you've heard from various users. Why don't you use the hand function? Where's that again? Greg, under reactions? Is it
Under reactions for most people, it should be. We have a question from Shirley Fisher. Go ahead, Shirley.
Yes, where are you, Shirley?
Good. I got my buttons working. Thanks. There's one issue that I want to raise, and it'll probably be addressed more next time. By the way, I'm a long-term MCL member, been a resident of Marin County for 40 years, hiker since 1975, backpacker. So my interest is primarily hiking, was a road biker, never a mountain biker. So I don't have a perspective from that. But one of the things I think is really important is to understand the experience of solo hikers or hikers who are not in organized groups, which haven't been spoken to yet, where a lot of the purpose of going out into the woods is to really be in nature and to appreciate the solitude and to appreciate the nature sightings and the just the quiet that you can have there. And I think one of the big issues that has not been thought about or addressed in any of the comments so far is the issue of right-of-way. It sort of seems to be assumed that when bikers and hikers meet on a trail, that the hikers are supposed to jump aside and the biker gets full right-of-way to go past. I want to give the experience of a 74-year-old friend of mine who doesn't hike China Camp much, but hiked once. And she was so bothered by how much of her time she was spent jumping out of the way. She's 5'2", by the way. She simply stopped getting out of the way and challenged the bikers, coming at her to do something. She said most of them were terribly shocked that they stopped and eventually did let her go past and then continued on their way. I think this is a huge issue because we haven't really dealt with what are our basic assumptions in the sharing of open space. And this is particularly true as we consider opening more and more trails to multi-use. There are, I'm sure, been discussed pullouts and all those kinds of things, but I think that one of the biggest things is thinking about how do we really respect each other? I know there are examples in other parts of the country and other countries where separate trail separation and different types of trails have worked well. That may be one idea to try. I do think that multi-use trails don't really meet many people, either of the users' needs. The bikers can't go as fast as they want a lot of times because the hikers are there. The hikers are afraid of people coming from them from behind, and now from in front, and now from behind with e-bikers come silently up on you. So it's a scary business for everybody around. And then you add in the dogs and the occasional horses. I've never had a problem with an equestrian in the times I've been hiking. So that's what I wanted to say. I think those are
That's
issues
great.
that need to be raised.
Shirley, I see a lot of land managers here, and I just make a note of this because I think that this is a fairly chronic concern. So other questions?
Linda Novi, go ahead.
Linda? Want to unmute yourself?
I'm unmuted and I'll lower my hand in a minute. I think for me, it was interesting to hear Haley talk about not riding her bike on the weekends because it's so crowded. For me as a hiker and horse rider, yeah, I choose carefully when and where I ride my horse for safety's sake. And as a resident of Cascade Canyon, where we've become a regional magnet for mountain bikes and hikers, the residents here, we simply don't go out on the weekends, or we go at 6:45 in the morning and we're out of there. Clearly displacement is happening for safety reasons, for being crowded. I really appreciate Larry Scheibel's raising our awareness of our impact, all of our impact on wildlife, and that we're driving a lot of wildlife away. And there's articles being written about wildlife is turning nocturnal, and then now we're invading the nocturnal space. I think we need to start considering things such as carrying capacity and what is actually can be allowed. Haley, you also rang another bell for me. I think when you talked about when COVID started and it was locals only, all of our neighbors here at the Cascade Preserve were so thrilled to not be overrun. I think we have to start thinking not just about how we are using the preserve and do we have alternate days and do we create more trails and more dilution, but what is the capacity of the preserves to maintain the ecological integrity of them and balance how we are being in them. And I'm rereading Sand County Almanac by Alda Leopold. And he has a section on the ethics of restraint. And I think we have to start entertaining that concept. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I see. Okay, Bill Keene, your hand is raised. Bill.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
My name is Bill Keene. I recently retired. I was the general manager of Sonoma County Ag and Open Space District. So I'm kind of, well, I've lived in Marin a long time. I'm more engaging in Marin lately. I come at it from a little bit of a different perspective because I was a land manager and I did, more than triple regional parks' access while I was general manager up there. And one of the things that I think we have to keep in mind is everybody who uses our trails, they all pay the taxes that help get them preserved in the first place and built. So we've got to find a way, and I think this is important if we want to build the next generation of land conservationists or conservationists in general. We need to find ways to meet the various uses and the types of use that all users want. And that's from the person who's hiking and wants solitude to the person who wants to, who's riding a bike or a horse. And that's going to take some creativity. It's in some cases we might have directional trails. In some cases we might have alternate days. In some cases we might not allow certain uses on trails. But we need to have the diversity. I do it all. I trail run, I bike, and I hike, and I like them all. And I go to different trails for whatever it is that I want to do based on what I know to be out there, since I'm out there a lot. This idea that bikers, as a biker myself, yes, I like single track trails. I'm not interested in going super fast. I'm interested in an experience that challenges me and is interesting to ride. There are some trails in China Camp that are like that on the backside above Dominican. I don't know who built them, but the sight lines are good. And the way that they're built, you can't go fast. And I have never had a run-in, whether I'm biking or hiking up there, and I do both. So there's something to be learned from the trails that were built up there. But we've got to find a way to do this together. And I'm here to help. And I'm here to lend my expertise and experience in Sonoma County. And also, during my years living and recreating in Marin.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Bill. I'm going to use that as a sequitur. Unless there are other hands raised, we need to move along. I'm going to use that as a sequitur to turn to our land managers and start with you, Charlie, from National Park Service. Charlie is the Public Information Officer. How would you describe yourself, Charlie?
Yeah, I will get into that. And I can't say how much I have enjoyed listening to you, because so often, everyone, I'm only listening to either a complaint or a public meeting or something where we're trying to put out a literal or figurative brush fire. So I do communications and public affairs and external affairs, and also elected officials for the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. Sorry to interrupt, Nona.
No. That's I wanted to turn to you.
Okay.
Do you have any of your colleagues here with you?
Yeah, Mia is going to join us, and so boy, after this year and hearing again, I'm so blown away, and it's so great to hear all of the ways that you use the parks, and that in your response to unprecedented kind of use that we've seen. I live in West Marin. I met my wife at Point Reyes 20 years ago, and my daughter was born in Santa Rosa, and we've also seen very dramatic changes. So I'll just talk a little bit about what I do and the kind of things that I can do to help. And I really wanted to just be here because more than ever, this is a great opportunity for us to see each other, quote unquote, see each other. In a really insane, really difficult time. So I think you already exceeded my expectation. I know half of you, and I recognize names of the other third, and I look forward to meeting with you. Nona and everybody knows how to get a hold of me. So I always like to start out as a reminder that the Park Service at Golden Gate National Recreation Area, we manage 82,000 acres, mostly coastal, from Point Reyes to Pacifica, as well as Muir Woods and Fort Point, which are their own separate parks. And after the year of pandemic operations, where all the county land managers and really land managers throughout the state have found themselves providing the critical recreation and inspiration that you all talked about individually, in a time where we're also fearful for our health and safety, so it's been really a difficult time, but we have definitely recognized, okay, this is time for parks to step up and to provide that, and then and mostly allow a lot of new users, because they're not doing what they normally do, right, during shelter in place. So I have two public affairs specialists, and between the three of us, we do the traditional media work, public announcements about project work. We've gotten much better at giving all of you advance notice about, hey, we're going to be closing a trail for some maintenance or closing a parking lot. And then I also do internal communications to our employees, for example, during a power outage or a pandemic shutdown. And my branch responds to all public inquiries. So that's phones to our main line, emails, and the contact page of our website. And most of those are negative that if they come to us. But remember, we are always happy to have examples of positive experience. And one of my favorite was somebody from the San Francisco Biking Coalition. And when we had sort of this very informal slow streets when the Marin headlands were closed to cars. And one of the biking leadership said, you know, I had a magical experience today. I watched a coyote chasing a rabbit and I was the only one in the headlands, and it was whatever, 7:15. And of course, the segue there is, gee, Charlie, wouldn't this be great if we could continue this? And I said, duly noted. We relish positive, information and positive feedback, but at the same time, my job is to get folks answers. I work with Mia in her community work, and we coordinate very closely on making sure that we're seen and that we hear you, and I'm delighted to be invited to this. If you send in a public inquiry or email to the superintendent, Laura Joss, I will help work on that. And you're always welcome to send those directly to me. So I do have a good feel for the kinds of minor and major complaints or trends we've seen over the last year. And I'm delighted to sort of be able to give an idea of what we've heard or what we haven't heard. And then just one last comment is that, like a lot of you, we've moved to email and social media, including Twitter. And that is a very quick way to get the word out. But we recognize that there's still a lot of folks out there that are reading, the physical newspaper, and we can't always control what gets in there. So we're always updating our contact lists, and we're always looking at, like, are we reaching everybody in the way they want to be reached? And then the other thing I wanted to make sure that is my team also gets the word out about disabled accessibility. We have a very popular free beach wheelchair program, a beach wheelchair. And then the interpreter education staff are converting a lot more of our popular trails and our trail staff to boardwalks, installing touch tables and tactile displays. And we're just trying to improve our closed captioning and alt text for sight impaired. So you've asked about the e-bikes. E-bikes are legal and authorized in national parks. They have been a year through the informal compendium process, and over in December, the previous administration did the formal rulemaking process. We have taken a pretty hands-off approach on how that is. We've listed those on our park compendium, but we're really sort of relying on anecdotal evidence, all of you, to tell us how it's going. And as you've all mentioned, we are on any nice weekend, just like exactly what you mentioned at Tennessee Valley. Those are the equivalent of what used to be a holiday weekend now. So as long as we're in shelter in place, yeah, you're not imagining it. We still have our staff that are sheltering in place, our essential staff, the law enforcement rangers, park police in the city side, and a limited number of maintenance. The trail crew is working, but it has been a real challenge. And so a lot of what we've been doing over the last year is allowing the sort of anecdotal evidence. Oftentimes we don't hear about conflicts unless there's an injury or an accident or just something outrageous, which is a shame. But as you all know, last year we counted 17 million visits to the park, and that's going to stay consistent. So, like a lot of folks, we've changed a lot since we were established in 1972. The design of this park near urban area was for multiple use, and we're having trouble keeping up with all of those uses. And then I think something that all of us have to deal with is all of these new users that would normally be traveling to Illinois or Hawaii or whatever. Instead, they're sheltering in place and they're coming over a bridge to San Francisco or to Marin. So a lot of what I hear is what are we doing about all of these outsiders? And, you know, we should be doing more education. We should be doing massively more signage, but I think that's something that all of us are going to have to focus on, is that we have all these new users. Some are going to go back to their old habits, but many are going to stay with us. And that in itself is not a bad thing. Ultimately, the public safety is the critical thing. The trail crew has been operating during this last half of the pandemic. And, you know, as a reminder, we do rely on you to be our eyes and ears for, hey, there's a tree down, or this regular person is regularly abusive and needs to be contacted, or whatever.
Yeah. At some point, Charlie, it would be useful to, Kirsten Holder is does she manage the trail function? What is her responsibility?
She's in her planning division.
Yep.
And so they are the division that sort of like collects that data, looks at that trends, and proposes, hey, we need to have an overall plan to change operations. Yeah,
at some point, of course, our focus is on the headlands, on GGNRA here in Marin County. So at some point, it might be useful to just see, you know, you talked about signage, you talked about a number of things that really have to do with the physical response. Right. How do you distinguish between, let's say, Diaz Ridge Trail and Coast View? I'm going to ask that. Really, I've asked that of the state parks. So we need to move on, and I appreciate your comments, and we'll continue to contact you. All right. And we have to be the eyes and the ears. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you so much. This has been like very inspiring for me as well. We should be doing much more of this listening, but as you know,
it's hard to do.
We're not able to do that. So thank you. I've really enjoyed it, and I'll stay on. Thanks, Nona.
And I want to interject here. It turns out that somehow or other, George Foreman, who was going to speak about trail running, was not sent the link to Zoom. We sent him the time slot, but not the Zoom link. So we'll get his comments, and I got a notice while I was listening to you. So I have to apologize to Tom, to George, and maybe we can get him at the March meeting. I want to move on to like about 10 minutes each from John Campo to talk about how, and Max is here also, to talk about how County Parks and the Open Space District is responding to some of these questions that have come up.
Yeah, thanks, Nona. You know, I think the theme for the day is that folks like to do different things in open space. And I think about myself, my own experiences. I live in San Rafael. I have 2 dogs. So if I'm out with my dogs, I'll likely go to a fire road so they can be off leash. If I have my bike with me, I'm probably going to go to the New Ponte Trail. If I have my daughters with me, I'm probably going to go to Muir Woods or Matt Davis Trail. And if I want to go backpacking, I'm going to go to the Sierra Nevada. And I think Bill Keene kind of talked about that. And that's really how I feel like Marin County Parks thinks about it, is we want to provide those different experience opportunities for different people. We have, you know, backcountry trails and front country trails. Some are smooth and wide, and some are primitive and narrow. So I think we really want to have a diversity of experiences. But those trails and those planning projects, they should all meet those goals of reducing environmental impacts, create a sustainable trail network, and improve the visitor experience for the overall population. So how do we do this? Mostly by talking to a lot of folks. We have started a group called the Environmental Roundtable, and we met every other month about 3 years ago, and now we meet every month. And so as we talk to other stakeholders such as MCL or MCBC and kind of get some ideas for new thoughts and new planning efforts, we bring those efforts to this environmental community, the Environmental Roundtable, to help guide those projects to reduce the environmental impacts and really get into the details of the planning effort. So I can talk about a few projects that some of you may have been familiar with or been on. In 2017, we implemented a redesign for the Horse Hill Trail. So just to kind of give you some of the thought process on that, we knew obviously it connects to Horse Hill, which is an equestrian area. We know horses use that and folks use that to connect to the interior of the preserves. So we wanted to recognize that existing use. It's not a destination trail, but it's a connection and it's an important one. And it replaced an old gas line trail, which was a fall line trail, extremely steep. So we wanted to reduce the grade and make it comfortable. So our target audience was the equestrian hiking community. When we were thinking about the Ponte Ridge Trail, one of the first conversations I had was with Monty Kruger, the former Marin Horse Council president. And we talked about, you know, what's the existing equestrian use of that area? And she said there really wasn't any. And I have talked to some folks that have ridden horses there years ago, but it wasn't a common occurrence. Monty was mostly interested in preserving the existing uses of the Indian Valley area and the equestrian center there. And so we really focused on that and recognized that the Ponte Ridge area didn't have existing uses. I actually live in that neighborhood, so I know pretty well. There were some hikers, some dog walkers, some bikers, but it was a really steep, not pleasurable fire road. So it really didn't attract much attention. We also, with that project, had this opportunity to connect to a Class 1 pathway, the Pacheco Pathway. And that opened up different doors for us, such as equitability and parking, where we could actually, you know, Marin is obviously a very expensive community to live in, but you could actually drive, park, and get on this Class 1 pathway and then have access to this trail without disturbing the neighborhood. That was a unique opportunity we hadn't had really elsewhere. And then looking at how to transform the steep fire road into a sinuous trail, I mean, we spent over 2 years with the Environmental Roundtable discussing realignments and details and how do we minimize impacts to trees and grasslands. So it was a long, thoughtful process. In the end, it's an extremely popular trail. In fact, we were just awarded a state award for the development of that project. I was out there yesterday and I ran into the Terra Linda High School mountain biking team, which is a group of teenagers, most of them novices, and they were just thrilled to be there. They said they were going to be going there, try and get there every Wednesday afternoon. So in designing and thinking about that, obviously we want to minimize the resource impacts, but we also recognize that we believe it to be a popular hiking and cycling destination. It's open to equestrians, but we also didn't imagine that many equestrians would trailer in or access that trail. And so then moving forward to Rush Creek, which is a proposal project for this coming summer. That's one that is, again, right next to an equestrian center. And so the catalyst for this project was really to create a designated connection to the Nevada Horseman Arena, because there actually never was one. So we worked with the equestrian community there. And we also recognize that a lot of seniors use this place. You visit Rush Creek for senior walks, and our own rangers do naturalist walks there. So again, a different audience, and it's going to have a different feel. Mountain bikes also visit Rush Creek, but it's a feel like kind of a different community there. You'd see more kids, younger people, more novices. So that project, if it's approved, will also have a very different feel. So each one has a different feel based on the stakeholder conversations. And then looking forward a couple more years out, Roy's Redwoods, which is a very large scale restoration access improvement project. Those are hiking only trails. And so those trails, again, different audience, different feel. It's going to be, we're planning it to be inclusive access. So if you had a wheelchair, if you had a stroller, any kind of mobility issues, certain trails would be accessible. So I think that for me, when we're planning and thinking about these projects moving forward. We do a lot of community engagement. We do a lot of engagement with the environmental community. We really want to know what people think about these plans as we move forward and develop them and have them in the development process. I want to leave a few minutes for Max to jump in case he has something to add to that, but that was kind of the main points I wanted to hit on.
Yeah, Max.
Thanks, John.
John.
Yeah, thank you, Nona, and all of you for inviting us and for the great presentations. And the only thing, I think John, really captured, from both him and I know you're gonna have a follow-up session where you're inviting our chief rangers and some of our operations folks. Our connection with the community is really important, and making sure we're responsive and continue adapting our approaches and listening to all of you is really important. The other thing that's really important to the entire county, and we've been hearing a lot from our community, one of the really cool things about the pandemic and Zoom is that more individuals who never attended our board meetings in the past are able to attend our board meetings and become engaged with local government. And we're hearing, a lot more, especially through the Black Lives Matter protests about, equity and how we can better serve, communities of color within Marin County and folks who've, traditionally haven't been as engaged with parks and other aspects of local government. And so, I know from our past surveys that while some of our regional parks have a lot of diversity of visitation, that our open space preserves tend to be visited by people who live adjacent to the preserve and have very low levels of, racial diversity in the visitation. And so I think, we really want to think going forward, do more outreach and connection with those communities and understand how we can be welcoming to all communities. One thing that we heard, following up on some of the closures around the pandemic was that people didn't feel welcome coming to some of our locations and trailheads. And so just thinking about what we can do to be more welcoming to the broader community that we serve is also really important. So I don't want to take up too much more time, but really appreciate being able to join you all.
Thanks, Mike. I want to jump back for just a minute to you, John. One of the, Shirley Fisher brought up a question, which is kind of an interesting one, and it has to do with the actual, sort of behavior on trails, and that is the question of right-of-way for the various users. And we haven't touched on that at all. It's really a behavior issue and maybe partly an education one, but it's also an important one. Who, in your view as a land manager, who has the right of way? And we know the traditional sign that everyone gives to the horses, but having been a many decade hiker, I know that in my own enlightened self-interest, I jump out of the way of a bicycle. I also think of it as sort of a courtesy thing. So how does the right of way, how does that work? How do you see that?
Well, that old triangle, I feel like it's, in my opinion, is antiquated. I actually really like the model that the Slow and Say Hello campaign has put together, because to me, it all comes down to respecting another human being that you're out in this open space with. So it doesn't matter if you're on a bike, if you're on a horse or you're walking, just acknowledge them, say hello, respect them. And who has the right of way, in my opinion, would be determined by that mutual respect. So I think just slowing down, saying hello is really critical. And so I really love that campaign. I've seen the presentation and it's like, wow, that makes a ton of sense.
We'll do that. We'll hit that in March 11th. We'll really kind of dig into how behaviors can be changed, improved, and so forth. So, okay, thanks. I'm the one who interjected that. Bree Hardcastle and Mike Nelson, I know you're here someplace. I can give about like about 10 minutes.
Hello, this is Mike.
Yeah, hi, Mike.
So I'm here to talk about the about our California State Parks in Marin. Thank you for inviting me, Nona. sorry, I didn't have much prepared because it was kind of short notice. So I don't have any slides or screen sharing, but I really appreciate the comments and hearing everybody's input about the visitor experience in our state parks in Marin County. Like everybody else, we've been under extreme pressure from the pandemic and the increase in visitation, and we've tried to remain open and welcoming to all visitors in our parks. But obviously there's been some challenges with the ever-changing county health orders, and so we're kind of constantly adapting to those changes. I do want to give some updates because I think we have some interested parties here on some of the projects that we've been working on. Redwood Creek Trail, which is of interest to many of you guys in the Redwood Creek watershed. We actually broke ground on that project. I think last time I was with you guys, we had not yet begun to cut the trail. So we began to do that this summer, and through all the challenges, COVID related crew protocols and wildfires, we were able to get the trail cut from Deer Park Road across the Santos Meadows, and we began to install bridges and retaining walls, and we're hopeful to be able to complete that trail cut and all the structures related to the trail this summer. As you guys know, or as some of you know, that's a pedestrian equestrian use trail, and connects Golden Gate Dairy, the Franks Valley Horse Camp, and so along with Miwok Trail, and that'll be a once that trail is completed, it'll really open up a larger connectivity for our equestrian users, as well as the pedestrian users, and really provide a resource benefit while increasing that public safety component for the equestrian users. Nona, I know you're well aware. We also opened and then subsequently closed this Winter Bills Trail in Samuel P. Taylor. We closed it for weather considerations after about 3 inches of rain in the water year. I essentially hiked the trail every day to monitor for any soil displacement and kind of any sort of impacts related to use. As you know, that's a very sensitive watershed, and we want to make sure that we're not transmitting any fine sediments in Devil's Gulch Creek. And so we closed that trail and this winter, and we are hopeful to be able to open it again this spring. I've been in contact with Tom and other folks about having some sort of volunteer event, and COVID, pandemic allowing, we may be able to have some sort of more formal opening, maybe later this summer, and some sort of ribbon cutting. And we're working with our superintendent to make that happen.
Okay. Mike, Bree, you're here. Do you want to add to Mike's comments?
I'll just follow up briefly on a couple of things. I just want to recognize Mike and his crew have been out working throughout the whole pandemic. And so they're on our trails, checking those trails for issues, clearing trees for access, and really making sure that the state parks trails are open and ready for use by all of our visitors for all different types of recreation. And some big projects have been done that have really improved some areas for people to use, including Barnaby, Fire Road at Samuel P. Taylor, and in addition to Bill's Trails. So there's just been a lot of work that's been done, and wanted to recognize Mike and his crew for kind of the hard work that they've done throughout the pandemic. And then just wanted to follow up very briefly on some of the wildlife impacts concerns that were shared in Larry's presentation. And mostly just wanted to highlight the Marin Wildlife Picture Index project. That project has been running now for multiple years. We have more than 3 years of data in the Northern Array, and really more like 5 years of data in the Northern Array and about 3 years of data in the Southern Array. So that covers kind of the Mount Tam area, the core area of focus for one Tam, and then the area to the north, which includes some MCP lands and MMWD lands towards Lagunitas, and then Samuel P. Taylor and some of the NPS lands there as well. And what that data set has given us and will continue to give us is kind of big picture. The metric is occupancy, but it's really kind of the big picture of what's happening with our mammals in the area. And so what some of the goals of that project were to get kind of baseline mammal information. And so we have some data, some trend data from the first 3 years, and are continuing to analyze those photos. And so we may, as the project goes forward, be able to pick up or see some of the impacts, if there are some, from increased user intensity during COVID. But just want to advocate for, that project is a one TAM project that is funded by the agencies. As we all go through kind of fiscal challenges to keep that project running, we'll need continued support in that arena. And there's other monitoring that's going on that's more widespread. There's some long-term land bird monitoring that happens, that's been happening in the Redwood Creek Trail area and on other land managers' lands, and then bat monitoring as well. So we don't have highly focused, state parks does not have highly focused animal monitoring along trails, but we do have some data sets that can help us understand if the pandemic and this increase in use is causing impacts, and if that's a temporary impact or a more long-term impact. So just wanted to highlight some of those. And I think there was a question in the chat. How far behind is the photo index and analysis process? That actually is a really complex question. We're actually having meetings right now talking about that and talking about how to catch up. So I don't have a detailed answer on that. But we are continuing to move forward with cataloging, and the camera checks have continued to happen. So we're continuing to gather that data during the pandemic to make sure that we have as much data as possible. But stay tuned, because we will probably have more information on what that cataloging is going to look like.
Yeah, great. Okay. Okay, let's turn. Thanks very much, Bree and Mike. I did want to make a comment about state parks, because you have, in my view, one of the most complete handbooks on trail design. And you have some very carefully worked out standards, criteria, and obviously you're making decisions about which trails should be separate that is in use, like the Redwood Creek Trail, and those which can be multi-use, and you have different design standards for those different kinds of views. You may determine, just as John Campbell was pointing out, that the Marin County Open Space District also sees different uses, really sees trails in relation to different uses and different concentrations of visitors and uses and so forth. And I'm assuming that State Parks does the same thing, that you make those decisions for which users can use trails, visitors can use trails on the basis of local conditions. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You know, most of our trails in state parks, Marin County is no exception, are inherited trails from ranch logging roads, civilian conservation corps routes, and just by the nature of them, we want to make sure that they're sustainable because it can have quite an impact, you know, on our natural and cultural resources. So all of those considerations go into what type of use we allow on our trails.
Yeah, right. Just a quick update on Easy Grade. Is that still waiting for funding, or what?
Yeah. Easy Grade is still, you know, still essentially waiting for funded. It's an unfunded project, but
it's pretty much in the design. It's gone through the environmental review.
It has gone through the environmental review.
Yeah, it's kind of shovel ready. Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Sean, you've been very patient. Sean Horn.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us now and respond to the? I know you're in the midst of a planning process. You might explain that actually.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Sean Horn. I'm the Watershed Resources Manager with Marin Water. I'm going to try to hit on 4 topics, and I'm going to go over our Roads and Trails Management Plan, talk to you about an amendment that we did for Azalea Hill, which really does try to get to that separation of use, providing multiple routes in a really critical part of the watershed. And then, as Nona mentioned, talk to you about the e-bike review process that we went through and how that triggered some discussion and new planning work that we're starting, which is our recreation management planning process and where we're at in that. And then if there's time, I'll just really briefly reflect on some of the increased use that we've seen since COVID and what we've been doing as far as adaptive management strategies to address some of those uses. So as all of you are very aware, the district manages about 22,000 acres of land in Marin County. The vast majority of the recreational activities that we're talking about today happen on our Mount Tam watershed lands. There we have about 92 miles of roads, fire roads, that are accessible for cycling, hiking, equestrian use, and the other visitation that's passive. And then we have about 60 miles of single track trail that is open for hiking, but not for bicycling. In addition, there's about 60 miles of social trails that have been developed over the years through ongoing use by hikers and are at times poached by bicyclists, as well as some of our single track trails. What is the the Roads and Trails Management Plan? It's really a comprehensive review of the roads and trails network that is on our Mount Tam watershed lands and provides us as the district with a guide for how we manage those roads and trails to protect water quality, protect sensitive habitats such as wetlands, riparian areas and the such, and then also allows us to complete roads and trail maintenance projects in a way that reduces the impact of that trail network on those resources and that biodiversity that exists on the watershed lands. So as Mike mentioned, a lot of the roads and trails that we have within our system were inherited. So they're old fire roads, they're old ranching access routes, they're developed through livestock routes, they could be fire breaks, they were associated with old infrastructure that was improved or put in with power lines and the such across the watershed, and then have been updated to be our network of roads and trails. Since 2005, which was when the Roads and Trails Management Plan was adopted, prior to 2005, the district did install some roads to allow for facilities maintenance to operate as a water district. So we have pipelines throughout the watershed, we have tanks, we have pump stations, and we have dams and reservoirs, right? So we have to get to all of those infrastructure features. So there are some roads that were developed to support that. The district really developed the Roads and Trails Management Plan as its first comprehensive plan to provide us with the management techniques to maintain those roads for multi-use, right? For infrastructure maintenance as well as recreational activities. There was kind of three overarching goals within that plan. That was to improve water quality and reduce the amount of sediment coming off of our roads and trails. And it was to improve the network so that it would have a lesser impact on sensitive habitats. So you can think about making slight adjustments to road orientations to get us out of wetlands, to get us out of areas that were not thought about when, you know, ranchers might have put in a road back in the day, or loggers came through and actually removed the hardwood. And then the third goal was really to reduce the impact on the natural ecological function of the watershed. So the ongoing maintenance to try to address some of those impacts that all visitors do have on our roads and trails network. So there are a couple of assumptions that were built into that plan. That is that the plan was not a recreation management plan. So it was really about maintaining the roads and trails network for recreation, but also for maintenance of infrastructure. The other assumption that was in the plan was it was not changing or reconsidering bicycle use or the policies around bicycle use. And then the third assumption was that it was not a comprehensive redesign of the trail network that the district maintains and manages. So what did it do? Well, it provided us with a number of actions for us to guide our management and our work and our stewardship of the lands. It really provided the design standards for how we maintain our trails and the best management practices that we use to carry out our maintenance. It also provided us with a comprehensive inventory of the 92 miles of roads, the 60 miles of trails, as well as the social trails, and provided us with actions that we could carry out to address sediment runoff from those trails. So you can think of actions like rolling dips, outsloping roads, doing ongoing maintenance to improve conditions. That's really what the Roads and Trails Management Plan was about. And it also provided us with an approach for taking non-system trails out of the system to restore them. So we call that our Project Restore activities. And that was really designed to improve the habitat and the wildlife connectivity across the watershed, reducing fragmentation, reducing the impact that visitors do have on wildlife through removing some of those social trails. And that's an ongoing issue. It's really complicated. I will say that it's not one user group, it's all user groups that actually don't like us to take some of those trails out at times. You know, we all have a lot of love and passion for the mountain, and a lot of people like to go where they want to go. And that's where those 60 miles of social trails came from. People want to go to a vista point, they want to go to whatever, you know, area that's meaningful to them. And those social trails have established themselves. And we know from our land bird monitoring that Bree mentioned on the watershed that those social trails do have an impact on our wildlife species. And those impacts are associated with all of our visitors. So the Roads and Trails Management Plan is a really great document for helping us guide our management actions. However, it does have its limitations. It's not as nimble as perhaps we would like it to be. And I think this COVID experience that we're all going through really expresses that and kind of ties our hands in some ways to making some of those bigger adjustments that we might be needing now. There are structural adjustments. However, it does allow us to amend that plan, which we did do for the Azalea Hill project that all of you have been intimately involved in for years. And that project really was about establishing connectivity between the lakes area and Pine Mountain. It was really looking at how do we enhance hiking and equestrian over Azalea Hill, routes for hiking and equestrian, and then how do we provide another route for cycling that's also open to hikers, equestrians, and other users. And so that was done through actually going to an old road, Liberty Gulch Road, and actually downscaling that to a class 4 road, which is for multi-use. And then it looked at how can we remove some of the social trails that have been established within that area to protect the sensitive habitats that we have. And then ultimately we're spreading our users into a larger area through having 2 routes that go from these critical areas of the watershed. The real crux of the project, right, is to remove 4.4 miles of non-system trails and to restore the natural systems and habitats within those social trails. It's to adopt and improve 1.9 miles of class 4 road that's along that Liberty Gulch section that kind of hugs Alpine Lake. And then also to improve the 1.1 miles of trail that goes over Azalea Hill and really improve that with the intention of allowing better access for hikers and equestrians. And then also to make some major improvements to our parking lot at Azalea Hill, which is a major entry point, and for years has experienced some significant erosion off of the top of the hill that needs to be addressed. And so that's a critical component of this project as well. Azalea Hill, I think that's a good example of some improvements we've made on the watershed to address kind of the different needs of different user groups, and also to try to separate users within those areas. I think that what we're finding out there is that there are ways that we can maintain and build new trails or adjust trail infrastructure, like downgrading a road to a trail to allow for multi-use. I think separating use is really important and a critical solution for some of our issues that we're seeing as we see more use on the watershed. And then I think as we move forward, as we've been talking about, we are seeing new users, and e-bikes is one of those new user groups. For years, e-bikes have been using some of our open space lands, and this is broader than just Marin County. This is something that land management agencies throughout the state are beginning to struggle with and grapple with. How do we address this? Is this bicycling or is this something different? So the district started an e-bike community advisory committee about a year ago. Many of you participated in those meetings that were held. It was all initiated through a public meeting in December of 2018, I believe, where we really listened to the community to hear where their perspectives were in regards to e-bikes. And then we developed an e-bike community advisory committee based on topical themes that were brought forward. And we met 7 times over the course of about a 7-month period. We convened and developed a summary report that came out of that. And one of the critical components that came out of that was that the district really needed a recreation management plan. It was something that the district hadn't leaned into in previous years. And we're kind of seeing the increase in use that really demanded that. And so what was that? And back in 2013, the district did a user census study. At that time, we noticed that a trend of use that we are seeing almost 1.8 million visitors annually to our watershed lands. So that's a pretty significant number. And I think during COVID, we've seen that increase in a very big way. So the recreation management plan is our next big planning endeavor that we're going to be doing. Where we are right now with that is we're going to partner with the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy to initiate a stakeholder scoping process. Tentatively, our kind of concept here is that we're going to host 2 public meetings, and we're going to bring a panel of experts to kind of guide the conversation around what does sustainable recreation look like and what needs to be included in a recreation management plan that the district develops. And then we'll work with our stakeholders to hear about the different topical themes that need to be input into that planning process. And then we'll spend about a year probably working through and developing that through a pretty hefty public engagement process as well. So that's where we are there. And just in respect of everyone's time, I'll be very brief with COVID and some of the adaptive measures we've been taking to address the higher than normal levels of use. Our rangers have been saying that weekdays have become like weekends and weekends have become like holidays because we've just seen so many more users on the watershed. And one of the things we really do want to stress is that equitable access is a very important thing. And I think Max kind of started to discuss that and get to that point that we really want to make sure that public lands are accessible and available to all. And that means people within Marin County and beyond Marin County. That means that we have to share and be aware that it's all based around respect. And COVID has really given us, stretched our resources in a very real way about thinking about that equitable access. So some of the things in the COVID times that we've really been struggling with is parking. All of our access points have been overused. We don't have a lot of parking facilities. Some of our trailheads like Cataract are really being impacted by this increased use. With that increased use, we've seen a lot more trash on the watershed. Micro trash, just little scraps, candy wrappers, things like that, all over the place. So one of the things we've done to address that is we've partnered with California Conservation North Bay crew. We actually have a small crew going out and targeting all of our high use areas and collecting trash and walking some of our trails where we're seeing a lot of use. In regards to trails, I was out on Bon Tempe, Shady Side just the other day. And I mean, I will attest that you are seeing more use and you are seeing more expansion of some of the trails in certain areas. You're seeing more compaction. There definitely are more feet on the ground in those areas. We have a static budget for the most part in terms of recreation. And that's a major challenge, especially as we start to see this increase in use. And one of the most prevalent areas that we're seeing that static budget impact us is sanitation in regards to our portable toilets on the watershed. Last year, we spent $20,000 on portable toilets and we were fine. This year, we're up to $130,000 of unbudgeted, costs that we're having because of this increased use. And we've tripled our servicing and almost doubled the number of facilities that we have on the watershed. We've seen new users, and I think that's a really great thing. I think it really speaks to the importance of natural areas and open space lands in California and locally here in the Bay Area, and the need that people of all backgrounds have to connect with nature and be in nature. With that, though, we've seen an increase in use, and one of the major issues that I've been seeing is, dogs and the impacts that dog waste can have. And especially as a water district, that's a critical issue that we're concerned about as far as water quality goes. So these are all kind of COVID struggles that we're having. We gave a presentation to this group and at a board meeting not too long ago about some of the adaptive measures we've taken, and we'll continue to kind of carry those forward as we move into our recreation plan. And I just want to say I really appreciate the discussion and the points that were brought up here today, and I hope that we continue to carry those forward as we move through our recreation planning process. And we'll make sure to engage all of you.
Thanks,
Yep.
Sean, for a whole lot of information in a very tight time. And for the rest of you who have come from the land management side of things, we understand that we share responsibility. We often hold you responsible. We ask you to do things when in fact it's a shared public responsibility. This is we're up against, we're going over time, but we are going to continue this discussion with some throwing out some more ideas on education and where that's limited when only enforcement is effective in reining in some people who are never going to really be educated, don't want to be really. So we want to look at those issues. March, same date, March 11th, and look forward to you. If you have questions, can you hang on to them for a month? And because we'll take this up, there will be a little bit of repetition, but not a lot. And so I look forward to seeing you all, and thanks all of you for your patience today. Any burning questions? I'm looking out at rain, and I'm really excited. So it's a good way to end the day, I think.
My boss has a burning question, it looks
burning
like.
question, which the more rain we get, the less burning maybe. I don't know.
It's funny, it's related to the rain. I just wanted to make one quick comment, and that is I didn't hear a whole lot about management of our trails, and I think that's an important thing.
Yeah.
Things like seasonal closures, closing trails when they're wet to all the users. And I do think that some of this share, if we even and odd is something to consider, or time allocated on, not everywhere, but there might be some places where that could separate users and reduce the impact as well.
Yeah.
And then also seasonal closures for wildlife, right? So I'm all
exactly. And we do have some of those. We have some
Yes.
of those in force for the spotted owl. But so thanks all. Any other burning questions?
No, this is Mia. That's what I was going to share, is that we do all share a common respect for all the other wildlife that's out there, and that is in force right now with the spotted owl closures and soon the nesting bird closures, and all of our work now. It's amazing. Marin County is a leader in this. Our work is all planned around respecting these other life forms. So right up there with 30%, and in this county much more. It's a real testament that these are the guiding principles.
Right. Good. Okay. Mia, were you able to see Larry Scheibel's photo essay of Mount Burdell?
Oh, I was, yes. And I made many notes to talk with him and others about, to match my observations and thoughts. So that was very beautiful. Thank you. And also, I like Charlie, I listened very carefully to observations, thoughts, changed behavior, impacts, so we can continue this dialogue.
Great. Okay. All right. Thanks very much. Nothing is solved in a day, but we're all in it together. So we look forward to talking about this further. Thanks so much, and enjoy a rainy evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much. Bye.